Good morning. How are you doing? All right, so we'll go straight to the scripture, okay? So we're going to talk about, I'm going to pull out a lot from Esther for today. And the main scripture is from verse 14. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. So the hook theme is for such a time as this, right? So hope is we're going to learn about hope through the story of Esther. And for such a time as this, think about the time that God is giving to you now. What time are you living in? Just in paraphrasing your life, just think about your life. And then through Esther's story, we're going to learn about how she used the virtue of wisdom, faith, courage, and obedience for divine purpose. Esther was my first sermon when I was about 23 and a half. I was young. I was a young seminary student, just married. And I love Esther, one, because, and I started loving her more. So my daughter's middle name is Esther, and I'll tell you a story about this. So I was bullied as a child, kindergarten, and my name was Star. And so the older girls, when we were riding to school in the school bus, said, you know how police have stars? And your name is Star. They're going to come after you, and they're going to put you in this big pond, right? And as a kindergarten, I was scared. I went home crying for half a year. So my name was troubling me. I was bullied severely as a very young child. And so I went home crying, and mother changed my name to Margaret. At that time, there was Margaret Thatcher, who was the Prime Minister of UK, and then Margaret Alvad. She was a state leader in my country. So those were powerful, strong women in my country, and my mother named me after Margaret. But as I grew up, I missed that name. I started to understand the significance and the power of that name. So when Sarah was born, I claimed that name back because Sarah means star. And not having enough with that, I named her Esther, which is star in Hebrew. So I have a very beautiful love relationship with Esther, the book. She was named after Esther because she was a courageous queen of Persia. Right? And so I imagine my daughter that she will be bold and courageous, having walked through this path of being bullied, and where I changed my name because of that. It was a way of claiming that power back and passing it down as a legacy and continuing to tell that story to my daughter that, you can have courage. So Esther is beautiful to me. So background, let's go to the background, another version of Esther. I scope the internet, try to see what would be the closest version of a Middle East queen, right? And so in the book of Esther, we find a captivating story of a young Jewish woman chosen to be queen. So unexpectedly, she was thrust into a position of influence, right? So Esther, the main character, was born an orphan, and then we have Mordecai, her cousin, who raised her up, and the Bible tells that Esther was very obedient to Mordecai, who was like a father figure to her. And then third is King Xerxes, or Ahasuerus, the king of Persia, and Esther married, and that's how she became a queen. And then there's the bad guy, Haman, right? We always, who wanted to annihilate the whole Jewish people in Susa. And so you have the hater, right? Imagine you as a main character in your life, and you have person who are supporting you, people like Mordecai. Think of the people who are a person of authority, who you are accountable to. And then there's also haters in your life that when you think about them, it disturbs you. So I hope you consider this as we weave through Esther 4 today. And so let's go straight to the scripture, expanding that Esther 4:14. So Esther came to this influence, and it was because of a great great conversation. And the conversation was between Mordecai, her cousin, her father figure, and Esther. So when news was heard that Haman was going to kill all the Jewish people in Susa, Mordecai went to Esther, and they had this conversation. And when Mordecai told Esther that Haman had this plan, evil plan, Esther was afraid. She was fearful. And so, this is where Esther 4:13 comes. So do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. And so do not think that just because you are the queen, you will escape this. Because what will happen? She will be the only one surviving, and all her people will be gone. Imagine you're the only one surviving in your community, and everybody is killed, right? So if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. So the key word is, if you remain silent at this time. And then position. What position are you being placed by God so that you will have meaningful impact around the lives around you, right? And then for such a time as this, you were born. And this is meaningful if you're questioning your existence. Lord, why am I here, right? What's the purpose of my existence? So Mordecai first report to Esther, right? And what Mordecai is saying is that, even if you remain silent, God's work will continue. God will find a way for his people. God will do his thing. But the question is, he will work with or without you. So there's a choice. There's a situation here in our lives, or at that time in Esther's life. And Esther has to make that choice to be involved. Because if not, she can make a choice and be out of the scene, but God will still carry through his purpose of rescuing the Israelites from Haman and his hands. But the point is God going to use you, right? So has God brought you to a life-changing, such a time as this moment? Have you had a moment where you have had such a time as this that God used me for his purpose? And whenever God uses us, it's not only for our selfish growth. Our growth is always related to the growth of others. God always wants to use us to make other people grow. So in this case, God has positioned Esther to this royal position for such a time as this, so that Esther can save his people who was on the brink of death. Right? So who knows? You have come to this situation because you're in for such a time as this, right? Maybe it's for the salvation of many or for just one person. Pastor just want to talk about who's your one person. Who's that one person who is far away from God? Who's that one person who needs the loving presence of God in their life? And maybe it is intended that you are meant for this one person. You're meant for such a time as this for this person. So maybe it's for revival. Maybe it's for restoring broken relationship. God is calling you to such a time as this. Maybe it's for healing or relief. Maybe it's for you to go and visit that person who's hurting physically as well as mentally and spiritually. So where is God placing you? Because whatever it is that you're going through, whether you choose to be involved or not, God will still be involved in that person's life. God still loves that other person, but the point is whether he's going to use you as part of the plan. Don't you want to be? Think of that one person, right? And don't you want to be involved? That means we go back to who's your one? Who's the one person that I'm going to invite and invest all the time, money, resources God has given to me so that I will be a good representation of the loving and mighty God who is involved in my life, in that person's life. So you can trust that his plan is always for your good. So whatever you're going through, maybe you don't find the good in it, but there is good, and it will glorify him. It is for you to find that goodness in it. Keep digging it, and he will bring his purpose to you, even through that through that brokenness that you are going through, or even through that joy you're going through. So I've experienced Esther in many ways, right? So the first sermon I preached when I was about 23 and a half, I remember vaguely talking about Pastor, my husband, being the Mordecai in my life. I remember when I was so blindly in love, I was happy to just marry him and come to the United States, right? Just leave my life. And then Pastor said, I don't want you to just come. I want you to study with me. We're going to go through this together. So we graduated together from Northern Baptist Seminary in Chicago. We all have a perspective of Esther depending on the phase of life we're going through. That's what I'm trying to say. So at that time, I had a Mordecai and people, my support system, who were lifting me up to become the person that I was going to be on my journey, on my discovery to self and how I can be of use to this world, right? And then I happened to read Diana Haggie's The King's Daughter, right? And in her book, and this was relevant for me as a 25-year-old, Diana Haggie talks about how Esther prepared herself to go into the king's court so that she will be beautiful. And they had all this beautification. And Diana Haggie and her church did something like for the ladies of the church where it was a self-care project, So wow, that's cool, As I kept growing in my faith and as a person in my age too, I see Esther as this bold and courageous queen. That was the phase where I had Sarah and so there was a legacy thing going on. I'm still championing for the cause of other people, that I can still be a source of empowerment for other people, especially for other women, right? So I want to go to my story today. This was, I don't even remember the date. This was the day my husband got sick. This was the day he started showing signs of, right there, started showing, we slowly caught on later in the afternoon, he was showing signs of stroke, right? So a great thing was happening, I'm the first woman ordained among my community, more than 125 years of Christianity, and people have been waiting for this. There was not a single dry eye in that room because they couldn't imagine this, that a woman can be ordained, and even some of the male pastors were crying, And so powerful thing happening. And for me to be ordained, let's walk back the story. The executive director of my pastoral organization said, I think it's time to ordain you. I have been locally ordained in Fort Wayne, Indiana, 2006, right? But we want to recognize the ordination because you have proven with your tracks, with your walk, that you can be ordained, right? Okay, for such a time as this. And so when the proposal went to the church, usually it takes the deacon to have a meeting, right? There's about 40 to 50 deacons, maybe about 6 to 8 women in the deacon. And so they wrestle whether a woman should be ordained. And so they couldn't decide. So they said, let's call the whole village, So it took the whole village to come together to go towards this new direction. People talking about whether I should be called a pastor. I should be called reverend, So, and then once this is done, this is my tribe, right? And other tribes started talking about it. So this is a picture from a newspaper, from my people's newspaper, called the Ukhrul Times. And it was shared among the other tribes. And they started having this conversation. So it will not come to consensus, like in any issues, doctrines in life, not 100 people will agree on doctrines, okay? So let's come to peace with that not everybody will be on board with you. But the good that came out of it was people started having a conversation whether a woman should be ordained or not, So when this was posted in multiple channels, group channels, there was also comments, no, Paul said a woman should shut up. People quoted the Bible out of context, and so I saw this comment because I saw this comment on the second day after maybe third day when I came to Delhi when my husband was hospitalized. So very distracted, right? And I say, no, this time is calling me. This is not the time for me to argue. This is not the time for me to prove myself. I have proven it because men have come forward to say, we want to ordain you. It's done. That thing is done. I don't need to argue about it. It's there, right? It's done. At this point, what is my focus? What is this time calling me to do? I need to take care of my husband. I need to take care of my family. So not to be distracted by the voices of the world. It was noisy, and I have to reel it in. There was only one conversation I had about this. This is the second time I'm having this conversation after 6-8 months, right? I said, because of those hateful comments, so 95% of the people are happy about it. Maybe 5% are just making the noises. I don't have to answer back. And there are lots of people like, this is moronic, So I said, I am all the more passionate about to lift up women. So if ever I'm going to come back to this region and I'm going to invest my energy and all the resources I have, I'm going to invest in women's empowerment. I'm not going to invest in arguments, I'm going to invest in what's good, what's going to build up people, So that's what I decided. So it is not for me. I learned a long time ago, should I go into Paul, the doctrines and all? And I said, Lord, I don't understand, even in my early years of seminary, but you show me. And he's done it, he'll say, okay, go get your doctorate. Everything, he opens the door for me. I don't even have to chase it. If it's meant to be, he will open the door, just like the association came and said, we want to ordain you. God will open the doors. So it's not for me to argue. I will keep doing the good. I will keep doing so. But at that time, that was hard, spiritually, mentally, to let go of that argument and just focus on what's more important. The most important thing in the first week of January was my husband's life. My husband was fighting for his life. And so in times when God calls you for a battle, you have to see what is this time meant for? Is it meant for useless argument, or God has a greater purpose? And when I switch my focus, God will do your battle. God will do my battle. There's no doubt about it. He has orchestrated this thing, and he will finish the battle that he has started in my life or your life. So let's go to, did I miss anything? Okay. So let's go to the virtue. That's my story, how he built me up. And he's continuing to build me up. I don't know what it will look like, but he will slowly show me, just like he has done for the past decades in my life, and that I will be a source of blessing through whatever he has given me. So when I was reading Esther 4 for this sermon, I started looking at what are the virtues that help Esther to fulfill the divine purpose that God has for us. So in the book of Esther, chapter 4, Esther agrees to help the Jews, now knowing that it's, the Jews may vanish, So Esther's journey is one of profound wisdom, faith, courage, obedience, where God fulfills his divine purpose. These virtues can shape our lives and help us to navigate the challenges of our own lives with grace and purpose. So let's go to the scripture. Wisdom and faith. So in verse 15, then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai: go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. So when Mordecai, her cousin, informed of Haman's evil plot, to destroy the Jewish people, Esther understood the gravity of the situation, and she recognized that her unique position as a queen gave her access to King Xerxes. Like, she could approach the King Xerxes. But she didn't rush impulsively into going into his court impulsively. She exercised wisdom by taking the time to assess the situation and weigh the cost of her decision. Sometimes when we see something wrong, we rush into the scene. Maybe it's a good time to find wisdom, to pause and reflect and really ask, what am I meant to do in this situation? And so when Mordecai asked Esther to make a decision, she chose not to listen to her fear that she may die, but to do what is right. So she did two things. One, she fasted for 3 days. For 3 days and 3 nights. She fasted and prayed. She went to God even before she acted. So she went to God first, even before she went to the court. And then secondly, she asked her people to pray for her. So she asked help for people. So Esther fasted and prayed with the people. She didn't do this alone. So this is a reminder that when we are going through a battle in life, that we shouldn't be doing it alone. We should go to God, one, first, and two, ask people for prayer and help. A help could come in the form of a good conversation that will give you life, or it could come in the form of other resources. Because we're dealing with many stresses, right? And so Esther's faith is not in her own strength. She learned to have faith in the unchanging character of God, that God will come through in this, because He is faithful and He is in control. When you think that things are out of control in your life, just be reminded that God is in control, and we need to go to Him because He is a faithful God. So we need to examine our faith. Even if we say we come to church regularly, maybe, but that's different from just stepping back, pausing and reflecting on our faith and asking ourselves whether we trust God enough to step into the unknown. Each of us have our unknown, uncertainty of our life, and we are confident enough that His purpose will prevail. One, you need to know the purpose He has for you in your life. So know that purpose, and then making sure, being very confident that His purpose in your life will prevail. And that demands faith. So how's your prayer life? Are we taking time to pause and reflect and really spending time with God? And then are we learning to depend on God? Who are the people in your support system? Think about your week, your past 1 week. Did you ever ask for prayer from somebody this week? If you did, that's your support system. If you didn't do, you need to think and reflect and say, do I have a support system, spiritual support system, that helps me grow as a person, that helps me fight the battle in my life? So who's your support system? Esther went to her people, and then she did the fasting and prayer herself. Find your support system. The second point after faith and is obedience and courage, right? When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. So despite the danger, she takes Mordecai's advice by agreeing to approach the king. And that could result in her death. Remember Queen Vashti? King Xerxes is known for his impulsiveness and violence. And because Vashti did not show up as King Xerxes commanded her, she was banished. Some believe that she was executed, beheaded. So she is going to approach this king to ask to save her people. So it needs obedience and courage. If I perish, I perish. She knew what she was going into. We see Esther walking towards her own potential death sentence. And each step Esther takes into the king's inner court reminds her of her depth of sacrifice. When I got ordained, it was, my husband got sick during that trip. I had just finished preaching in the village of the governor of Nagaland, 3,000 plus people. And then I went to this village, another 3,000 to 4,000, to be recognized for this. But it comes at the cost. Everything beautiful also comes at the cost. Everything in life is not rosy. Let's be real, and operate from that perspective. And are we able to even pull through that despite the thorns in life? So what are you willing to risk to follow God? Are you giving up anything to follow God? Are you giving up anything to follow the God's will, the calling that He has called? Say He has called you for this blank thing. And are you willing to risk maybe ridicule from your family and friends for being a holy cow? That's one of the terms for Christians in India. How are you operating with wisdom? If so, the world is tough. That's where we need the wisdom, faith, obedience, and courage in our life, so that we can carry on with this great God we profess to be following. So it's not a blind faith we're following. Faith, of course, is the things unseen, but we know the cost of doing this, and it demands wisdom, faith, obedience, and courage in our life. So let's be real. Esther was as real as a human can get. She was fearful, but we've had all those moments where we were presented with a crisis of conscience, right? Where doing nothing is easier. Some of you, all of us have done nothing in situation of conscience because we don't want to be ridiculed. We have passed many opportunities like that because we haven't had the courage and the wisdom and the faith and the